By the end of this video, we'll have our one enemy here who walks off the ledge toward us, and we'll also have another enemy here who can properly detect a ledge without actually hitting a wall and change directions accordingly. Let's get started. To achieve this effect, essentially what we'll want to do is draw a couple of raycasts at the right and left edges of our enemy and draw them downwards to detect if we are touching the ground or not, and then change directions accordingly. Back within our enemy movement script, we'll need a new private float variable, and we can call this half height because we'll be drawing some vertical rays. And we can set half height to be equal to sprite renderer dot bounds dot extents dot y. Let's go down to the set direction method, and we can start setting up some new variables. Because we will be changing the start point of our raycast, we'll need to declare local variables to compensate for this change in start position. So I'll make vector2 right pause, and I'll set that to be equal to transform.position, and then vector2 left pause, which will also be equal to transform.position, and then we'll say right pause.x plus equals half width, and left pause.x minus equals half width. Next, I think we can actually optimize this code a little better here. Especially since we're going to be adding a couple of extra else-if statements, we essentially would be repeating this condition to check what direction our player is moving in. So rather than repeating it, let's just make an indented if statement. So first we'll check if rigid body dot velocity dot x is greater than 0. We'll do one thing, and then we'll say else if rigid body dot velocity dot x is less than 0. We'll do another thing. We'll now delete this second condition here from our if statements, delete the and signs, do the same on this one here. And now we can put this within these if statements. This is also a little more efficient because it means we're only raycasting in the direction we're checking for, as opposed to checking raycasting in both directions at the same time. So if we're moving right, we'll just put this if statement in here, and then we'll delete the else on this one, cut it, and put it in here. Then I'm just going to format the code a little better, so I'm going to highlight all of this and press Ctrl-KF, which auto formats everything for me. Okay, that's looking a little better. Now we'll check for a downwards hit, or rather a lack of a hit. We'll go here and say else if, and we're going to say exclamation mark physics. Always have trouble spelling physics. Physics2d dot raycast. I'm doing the exclamation mark because we want to check if there is no hit detected. So if this raycast does not detect any ground, we should change directions. We're going to check our right pause, which is this variable right here that we just set up. That's going to be our starting point. Then we're going to check in a downwards direction, vector2.down. The length of it is going to be half height plus a little bit of offset, and then it will be layer mask.getMask, and that will be our ground layer. And then we'll say, oops, I think we had an issue there with our brackets. Let's just check. There we go. We need to make sure there's 3 closing brackets here because that matches up to 1, 2, 3 opening brackets. And basically here we can just copy this and put it in here. We can change our direction. Now we can copy this else if statement, go down here, paste it, and just replace right pause with left pause. Now we can go back to Unity and give that a test. If I move the enemy on top of the pillar, we can see that he is indeed detecting the edges and swapping directions just fine. However, I did make one mistake here. He's not changing direction. So if I go back to the code and change this to say false, now he properly flips the direction he is walking to. Of course, there is another issue, whereas if we were to raise him in the air, he just spins crazy, so we probably don't want that to happen. Let's take care of that next. To account for spinning in the air, we can make sure that he is only setting his direction or changing the direction if he is touching the ground. To do this, we can do an is grounded check on our enemy, so we can write private bool is grounded, and then we can go here and say private on collision stay 2D, and we can say if other dot game object dot compare tag ground, then is grounded is going to be true, and else is grounded it will be false. We should also do a private on collision exit 2D, and here we can just always say is grounded is false because we don't really care what the enemy is touching at this point. If he's not touching anything, he exits a collision, then he's definitely not going to be grounded. Then over here, we can just do this for all of set direction and say if is grounded. If he's not grounded, then we're just going to return, and we're not going to execute any of this code. If we go back to Unity, we'll need to go to our platform tile map and make sure that this is properly tagged as ground in order for it to work, and then we can give it a test. Now we can just lift our enemy's Y position, and we can see that indeed he does not spin like a maniac in the air. He just walks in the proper direction. Finally, we may want to make it completely optional as to whether or not our enemy does indeed stay on the ledge or walk off. Chances are we probably want to have enemies of both types. Back on our enemy movement script, we can make a new serialized field, call it private bool stay on ledges, and let's just make that true by default. Now we'll go down here to the change direction method, and we can say else if stay on ledges and the rest of this, and then just copy this and put it down here under this else if. Now we should have that flexibility. We can go ahead and test this out. I'll just go to my platform tile map, and I'll probably make a few extra tiles on here for ease of testing. So let's just go ahead, draw some extra platforms. There we go, that looks good. And I'm also going to take my enemy at this point, I think, and turn him into a prefab. So I'm going to go to folder, make a new folder, call it prefabs, and just go ahead and drag this enemy character into here. We'll leave this guy as is up here, but then we'll drag this enemy down onto our game. And we'll just take this guy, go into his inspector. We will go to the enemy movement script, set his start direction to -1, and change it so he does not stay on ledges, so he should plop, 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 and walk towards our player. Let's test that out. And here we go. Yeah, he walks off right towards our player and then starts flipping directions. And then if we go over here, this guy is just remaining on the ledge. In our next video, we'll be adding enemy interactions so that the enemy and player can bounce off each other, and the player has the option to both kill the enemy or get knocked back by them depending on what happens. See you there.